Welcome back, MTG Joe here. I'm still really sick, but gonna try to get a meta update out for Standard Best of One today. So we usually do quite a deep dive. We usually look at like 7 to 10 decks. Today we're gonna do a little bit truncated. We get the data as always from MTGA, companion tool that tracks Arena's like win rate data, both for yourself and then aggregates it with other users. Link to use on tap is below. I'll paste all the deck lists today just in the interest of like my own sanity and the fever I'm dealing with. I'm not going to timestamp the stuff. The lists will be in there. You can just kind of pull up the list from the comments if you want to take a look. I apologize, but wanted to get something out today. Something better than nothing. We will try. I know folks have been asking for the other formats, Historic, Explore. Really, it's just based on availability of data. I will take a look hopefully tomorrow and see what's available and what we can pull together and kind of go from there. So the popularity of the day, mono red is still the most popular deck. We've seen it peak at 20%, and it's kind of come down to 19, so not a huge drop. We did see the Golgari Midrange deck kind of creep up from the past week where it was around 4%. It's up to 8.6. Mono white humans and Selesnya Enchantments both kind of hanging strong. We see an uptick of the mono white control deck, which is basically like mono white midrange, just heavy on planeswalkers, stuff like that. I think it was from a CGB video, like anti mono red, but we can see with the win rate here, it's got like a 51% win rate. So I don't think it's doing the job that it's intended to do if it's, winning 1 out of 2 games at best. So popularity of the day, kind of looking at that. If we're looking at the week itself, Diamond and Mythic rank, we're looking at 100,000 games of Magic played from September 18th to the 25th. And kind of an interesting take on mono red. We've seen some of the evolution of the deck, obviously to kind of get the edge in the mirror matches and also just decks that are kind of gearing up for more removal. So this version's a little bit more all in terms of generating Godric's celebration ability every turn. So Godric's a very powerful card. We in the past have seen Squee in this list, but the versions are playing Urbrask's Forge instead. And I think this card's really powerful. Actually, one thing before we kind of deep dive into this, one of the announcements from Worlds weekend was that there's going to be kind of a return to paper play of Standard. The store championships will be moved to Standard, so there might be some more incentive with promos and just kind of getting people back into FNMs to play Standard. So if there is decks you're interested in building, it might be worth to pick up cards now. I picked up like 39 cards for mono red aggro for $24. It's really cheap right now. But a lot of the cards are selling out, so it's worth kind of picking up. I got mostly foils. But this version here, you have Forge that just makes attackers every turn, and then Godric comes in, gives you a bunch of power. You have Reckless Impulse, runs Resolve for card advantage. You have Raging Battle Mouse that allows you to push through, like it basically makes your second spell. You can play two drops on turn 3 thanks to the Battle Mouse. Also put some more power. Charming Scoundrels, still have the burn package, still have your Monstrous Rage, Kumanos. Voldaren Aperture is another way to trigger the celebration as well, thanks to the blood token. And I apologize for the cough. Like I said, I'm just trying to get something out today for folks. We're not normally this sick. So this is the list that won Worlds from J. Dupres, I think his name is. So this is Esper Legends. So notably, Adeline has been replaced in large part to Lord Skitter. Lets you go wide still, but it eats at the graveyard for value. This version here is on a split of 3 go for the throat, 1 make disappear, cutting down on the number of Ronas as it's bad into the mirror with Shieldreds, as well as just an increase in the number of Fairy Masterminds, allowing your opponent. So honorary legend coming in with Fairy Mastermind just gives you more ability to draw cards if your opponent gets any of the value there. Dennick is a house in against mono red, especially if you can do the curves of like Skrelv, Dennick into Rafine. Just powering up Dennick with lifelink damage is a good way to push through damage there. We have Urtai Resurrected as a kind of counterspell removal, Thalia for tax, and then 4 Shieldred. Just the nightmare for mono red. And the Esper Legends deck is really good into mono red. Having played the matchup from the other side, you have a very limited window when you could kind of go off. but you're often, especially in best of one, having to use multiple spells to deal with like Rafine and stuff like that. We then have mono white humans. No new cards in this one here, but it's a human tribal deck, leveraging synergies of like Knight Errant Eos to get you a bunch of card draw. Adeline lets you go wide, so fuels up the Knight Errant, removal and Brutal Cathar, as well as Ossification. Your Lord effect and Intrepid Adversary, and then just like a bunch of powerful 1-drops that kind of grow bigger or provide card advantage or protection. And then Coppercoat Vanguard is a Lord effect that also provides a pseudo tax and the ability to provide ward. Stacking with Thalia makes, those cut downs now cost 3 mana, for example, as opposed to strictly 1, which kind of helps there. Mishra's Foundry in the mana base as well for this deck. We then have the aforementioned Golgari Midrange, 62.8%. So this version, kind of similar. So this is a deck that's usually better in best of 3, just because it allows you to sideboard differently. Duress can be hit or miss in certain matchups. You do have decks that are fairly heavy in terms of creatures. If you're running into like the Esper Midrange deck, there's only 4 spells in the whole deck. But the kind of core of the deck is built around Mosswood Dread Knight, just providing recurring card advantage. A lot of removal and cut down, go for the throw, Virtue Persistence. Gix Command is a sweeper, Shieldred kind of mixed into there. Blissa, tough to deal with creature in combat. Blossoming Tortoise fuels your graveyard in terms of finding like your underdogs. And lands, helps you ramp up. And then also gives you a cost reduction for your activated abilities for lands. Blind creatures, and gives them a boost as well. So Mishra's Foundry costs 1 and becomes a 3/3. Cottage is 3 mana and becomes a 5. So some utility there. Anissa on the top end, Lilies, Trespassers, and then Sentinel, Lost Lore. Main board Graveyard Hate can deal with adventure cards, kind of resets your Mosswood Dread Knights as well if needed. Bramble Familiar just as a cheeky ramp card, and then you can also fetch quest, actually paying the mana unlike the Alara combo, as well as Misery Shadow, Terra Sunder, just flexible removal kind of all scattered in. From there, we go to Selesnya Enchantments. So another deck that didn't really tweak too much. We've seen Royal Treatment get played to some extent. If you want to go with the protection route, it does make an aura, and in that case, the aura is enters the battlefield, so it does trigger Calyx. It will not trigger Generous Visitor. Generous Visitor is a cast trigger, where Calyx is Constellation, which is an enter the battlefield. Similarly, Kami is a cast trigger that gets that. But the core of this deck is play out a bunch of cheap enchantments and then boost up your power with like Mashikos, with like a trample effect naturally with Kami, or with Audacity stacked onto one of your creatures. One thing you may want in these decks is mana base is like very sketchy. Play like 4 brush lands at least, and a Boseiju and an Aganjo, and then kind of trim. You could play 10 lines for Ossification and be fine. Very sketchy mana base with this here. You might also, just given the prevalence of mono red, want to play a couple more copies of Catilda. It's very good in those matchups. But yeah, play full 4 brush lines, and then play an Aganjo, play a Boseiju, trim down the basic forests and island or plains kind of down, and you're good in that case. You then go to mono black. They're calling it aggro, mid-range, control, kind of. Depending on the matchup, you can kind of take different positions. I would say more mid-rangey control. This version is got a couple more planeswalkers. So you have your Lily, you have your Sorin, you have an Ashiok in here, card advantage, makes you tokens, kind of value that way. And then you have your Virtues as a way to kind of removal, and then big top-end gameplay. Flesh Gorger for lifelink, Graveyard Trespasser, tough against mono red, gains you life. Iron Crag provides some value in terms of ramping, really helping you get up to that sweeper earlier, similar with Celestis. Lord Skitter, another way to have kind of Graveyard Hate mixed into there. So just a lot of flexible, powerful cards here. Looking at the number of, you could probably trim down Blast Zone, to be honest. You're probably one too many colorless sources in this deck. With the Axis of Celestis, it might be worthwhile, but I would probably just trim one of these and then just play another Swamp in the mana base, kind of going from there. And then lastly, we have 5-color Domain. So this was a deck like Reduke was playing to some extent, not on the Italian Reduke's list, but I have a video on this. I was doing really well for a while with this deck in best of one, and then I just I had like a really weird variance where I was on the play 10 times in a row. Oh, sorry, on the draw. Sorry, on the play would be great. On the draw 10 times in a row, and just was getting like the arena gods were just not against me that day. But on my list, I'm not playing the full Atali. I'm playing the full set of Archangel of Wrath. I prefer that. The Beanstalks provide you a lot of residual value just in terms of drawing cards. It kind of lets you cycle your Leyline Bindings. Between Leyline Bindings, Ossifications, you have a lot of 1 and 2 mana removal spells potentially in the deck, offset by Sunfall and then Archangel of Wrath, which just kind of stonewalls mono red early on in the mana base. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you think. Again, I apologize for some of the coughing and just the raspiness of my voice. Like I said, wanted to get something out today, but I will try to record some other ones. But if not, I will get stuff out as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one. Stay safe.